the desire to be better, to be bigger, to learn more, to become better is an innate human thing that has to be fostered.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And to your point, coupled with context. And so whether you're talking about understanding we are very small pieces of an enormous collective, or understanding history. You know, a few minutes ago you mentioned that, and I'm like, that's money, because people look around now and see these, you know, we're not in a perfect world, right? And so they'll see things that are like inadequate, less than ideal, and they'll think, blow it up, you know, or you know, tear it down, this isn't good enough. When you understand the historical context, there's a gratitude and a grace. We're imperfect beings in an imperfect society, but together, because of these ideals, we're moving. And if you look now compared to where we were 250 years ago, it's remarkable where we've come.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable where we'll go. But if you don't have that appreciation and respect. And it's like, you know, so I do think, context is critical to be grateful and graceful.
Nothing you do matters unless what you do matters. I'm Amadon DellErba, and this is Get Real or Die Trying. How we doing, tribe? Welcome to episode 45 of Get Real or Die Trying podcast. I am super excited to be here with my friend today, Eddie Pinero from Your World Within podcast and a very successful YouTube channel. He's an incredible writer. He's an international speaker, and he does awesome inspirational and motivational videos and content. He's also a singer and songwriter, and he's just a great guy. Met him about maybe a year and a half ago, and just getting to know him, and I'm just blessed to have him on my podcast today. So how's it going, man?
Amadon, so good to be here. It's just great. It's been awesome seeing the property, and just it's been a killer day.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Well, let's just start with, I've always been curious, the name of your podcast, Your World Within. You know, tell me the story of how you came about with that. Yeah,
well, there's a little bit to unpack.
Yeah.
So long story short, it was, I guess, a transition, you could call it, in my life. So I'd been kind of on the straight and narrow in the sense of doing exactly what I knew I was supposed to do. And it was the whole process of getting good grades, to go to a good school, to get a good job, to climb the corporate ladder. And, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it wasn't for me, and I was being pulled in a different direction. And I think stepping into that new world required a lot of relearning. Mm-hmm. And so, it was sort of I call it the year of like artistic exploration, where I'm playing acoustic shows around Boston, writing for people, taking the video camera out, blogging, engineering music, just doing all kinds of stuff. And for the first time in my life at that level, I experienced the idea of putting in work and not getting validation, right? Like normally in school and at work, if you exhaust energy and effort, there's some validation coming back relatively quickly. Yeah. And so I wrote a CD for example, first CD ever, distributed around Boston, thought I was going to change the world because I was young and naive, and no one hits it out of the park on the first try, right? Yeah. And it just my grandmother bought 12 copies. That was it. And it was what? How can this be? I just spent 6 months doing that. Something's wrong. And it's the universe teaching us what we all inevitably learn. And so Your World Within came from the concept of that sort of hurt ego and wanting to go back to that world I knew, because I didn't like the work, but it was safe.
Yeah.
And I felt when I got up in the morning, at least I know what's going to happen. Yeah. And there's comfort in that. Your World Within is no, trust yourself, unpack what's in there, put yourself against a corner, and, give yourself a chance to stand up for you. Because I think if you're courageous enough to go down that road, there's going to be some victory there. Just, and it was giving yourself permission to explore that side of things.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first met you, we were with a group of 4 or 5 other guys, and one of the guys, told me who you were. Oh, check out his YouTube channel, Your World Within. And then I was like, oh, that's really cool, because I had written a quote and did a quick little video a couple years back. And the quote that I wrote was, "You must go within or you will soon be without." And I think there's some, similarities there, that concept of like going within and seeing what your soul truly needs, what your purpose is, what you're doing. Because if you don't do that, you'll be without. And you'll be without what? Well, you'll be without purpose, fulfillment, happiness. And I just think it's very cool that you had the courage, to step away from the predictable, like, oh, I can go get a job and here I am, there's that routine, there's that consistency, I'm getting my paycheck, or I can take that risk and pursue my creative endeavors and do what feels good within me, and take that risk. And even doing that after you suffered kind of the disappointment of cutting your album and getting it to, thinking it's going to hit big and go out to the world, which I'm a musician too. And I think every musician feels that, which is a painful thing. It's like, what?
This is a top 10 song.
Yeah. This is art. And it just doesn't land for people. And that's actually a very sad, thing for the world too. And I think it's not necessarily the artist's fault. It's just that the world often wants something in a certain way and packaged in a certain way and isn't ready for that. And the music industry is just completely controlled, of who's going to make it and who's not. It's very hard to pave your own way and become known as a musician, no matter how talented you are. I mean, you got kids singing in the street who are like a million times better than, top 40 artists.
Yeah.
But they just didn't, they didn't get heard, they didn't get seen, they didn't get appreciated, But pursuing your creative endeavors is an admirable, cause, I think. And most people give up on it because we live in a world where you have to survive. You got to make money and you got to go do something. And the few, I don't want to say lucky because I know work goes into it, tremendous work and resilience and not giving up. But the few are able, who can find a way to survive and profit off of the creativity, is a very cool thing, And then, of course, the cool thing that you're doing is you're not just, being creative. You're an incredible writer, but you're writing something that means something. They're inspirational and motivational. And I've had a great, time kind of going through your content and looking at your videos. And another similarity in one of your videos, which I can't remember which one because you have so many, but I was just like listening and then writing down things, is you had a quote in one of your videos: "The pain will subside, the victory will not."
Yes.
And I love that. And it's similar to another quote I wrote that's like kind of my motto of life, which is, pain is temporary, victory is eternal. Mm. It's kind of the same thing. I was like, oh, it's so cool. Like two things have tied in already, like that Eddie's wrote. I can really vibe with this and really see the similarities and appreciate, what you've created. And, for those of you just learning about Eddie and listening to this podcast, I definitely encourage you to check out his YouTube channel. He's got all sorts of videos, different types of videos, really long ones you can listen to while you're driving or running or cleaning the house, and, shorter ones. But you're a great artist, and I think sometimes in the world, art isn't appreciated enough. Mm. And to have your art appreciated and to grow your channel from nothing to where it is now, over 700,000, almost 800,000 subscribers, and to get those views and to get that must be a rewarding, feeling for you. But tell me, is there any pivotal points that you recall, I don't want to say career, but in your process of doing this? I mean, it is a career, but sometimes I feel like the word career kind of cheapens it, Yeah,
no,
I
hear you.
You know what I mean? Because it's more than a career. This is like your passion. You're pouring your heart into this. So I don't want to cheapen it. But in your process, where you almost gave up, you're like, fuck this, I can't do this.
Well, so there is a moment, but I think on the whole, it is that sort of delayed gratification, right? Where the pain subsides, the victory doesn't. And just teaching yourself that there are so many, I'm fortunate in the sense that I could pull value from so many things I did, even places like the corporate world where I didn't love it.
Yeah.
But, I took pieces. So running for me is a big one. And I drew metaphors from it consistently, particularly starting out, because my brain, it makes sense to me that at some point, if you're distance running, it's going to hurt. And so the inclination is pain equals stop. Mm-hmm. And so when you learn no, this is something you just go through to get where you need to be, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't this make sense? You know, when you're sitting there creating videos that you think are going to change the world, and you spend a month on it and you release it and you go, yes, this is going to help people like it helped me. And sometimes it's crickets.
Yeah.
And like, it's just sort of continuing on and not taking it personal. You know, like, I think this is common for me. It happened all the time. Like, I wouldn't even know who I was mad at, but I'd release something and I'd be like, why don't people like they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get it. It's like, no, the market is not wrong.
Yeah.
You know, learn from it and continuously, you know, and I think like one of the biggest turning points was like 2017. Like, I just broken up with a girlfriend of 4 years, moved to Florida. I'm like, I need to focus entirely on this business, and just cracked because it was just so frustrating pouring all of yourself into this and not seeing this return that I felt like was close. I'm like, it's here.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a friend call me, and we're, you know, just, you know, what you're doing is impacting folks, and that's what matters, and continue on. And, you know, not that long ago, I like to tell this story because I think it puts this question in perspective. I was at a mastermind and talking about my YouTube journey. And the idea, like, wasn't to story tell. It was like, how do you win on YouTube? I was talking about watch time and thumbnail, boring stuff, right?
Yeah.
But important stuff.
Yeah.
And I had this chart where it's like 7 years of slow growth and then hockey stick up. And that was because I made a few adjustments in year 7 to how I packaged my content that shot it up. But if it was not for that 7 years of compounding, storytelling, trial and error, putting myself out there, there would be no growth. And so what the audience wanted to know, and this was sort of a light bulb moment, was not how do I make a good thumbnail? It was like, how the hell do you not quit for 7 years?
Yeah.
And I think it was as simple as like the door's shut. There's no off-ramps.
Yeah.
So like, I'm either going to be poor and help a small amount of people doing this, or successful and help millions of people. But like, this is it. Mm-hmm. And it forces you to evolve. Like when this is your thing, you have to adapt, you know? And so that was kind of the mindset behind it.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of people often have like an acute trauma or something in life that shifted them, changed their perspective, you know, and is their driving force, or they went through a tremendous hardship and it transformed them, and they pull on that reserve of like, this was the moment. For you, you know, was it like that, or was it just kind of an accumulation of things that you draw inspiration from? Like, where do you continue to draw inspiration? Because what you do, from my understanding, is you write first a script.
Yes.
And you're writing from a place of like inspiring and motivating people, and you do a very good job at it. And where is it? What is it that you're pulling from? Are you pulling from those times in your life where you were like sitting on your floor in your apartment, like broke and like, shoot, this isn't getting anywhere, you know? Or is there like an acute situation where, you know, I'm just curious if there's like situations in your life that you go back to and remember and pull that inspiration, because, you know, some of your videos have millions of views and they're like 3 hours long of just motivation, which is awesome. And they wouldn't have those views if it wasn't authentic, you know, if you weren't writing from a place of experiencing like one more step, just take one more step, just keep going, you know? Yeah.
I think it's just an innate desire to want to be better.
Yeah.
Like, I can't point to a single moment through childhood. I mean, the reality is, like, I had it very good.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived in, for most of my childhood, like the suburbs of LA, to, you know, middle-class family, parents that loved me, supported me. You know, expectations were high. And I just want to make them proud and have this thing where I want to fulfill my potential. And I think, you know, I'm sort of speculating to some extent, but I think what makes this stuff relatable is, like, I understand I'm not perfect. I mean, we talk about this all the time. You know, I'm on a journey here trying to, in many ways, transform, you know, and it's observing the everyday things that are just practical and real, and talking about, hey, I did this today. I thought it was a good idea. Got my ass kicked. I'm not doing it again. Here's why. Here's how I'm going to do it different, and here's how it might help you.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of simple methodology, and you know, you tie that to the musician in me. That's like, people aren't practical. They're not going to change by being pointed at and screamed at. You know, so it's like you deliver the message in a way that hits them in the feels. Yeah. You know, they're emotional. We're not practical. Yeah. And so if you can combine those two things, you get people to move. And that's what's so beautiful. I mean, that's the emails that I get day in and day out. It's like, you know, you help me think about one thing differently. And sometimes that's all it is, you know. I love that phrase, you're one decision away from a totally different life. Yeah. Because I can think of so many times, you know, one pivot just opened doors. Yeah. Yeah, you just said something that really hit home for me. You said combining the emotions with practical. Yeah. You know, and that's something I think is the pursuit of art, you know, but also like lasting change. You know, it is interesting that we live in a world where people need so much motivation. Yes. That's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? Like, it's kind of sad, but it's a fact. Like, life is hard, you know? People are struggling. They're trying to pay their bills. They're trying to, you know, they're not doing what they want to do. They're not able to be creative. They got to be stuck in the rat race, so to speak. And whatever it is, that the need to be motivated to get up, even if it's just to exercise or to change your routine. And I think throughout time, there's always been a need for that. You know, like you mentioned the friend who called you when you were like, you went through your breakup and you were like, I'm about to give up. And he's like, no, you're making an impact. And he gave you motivation. Like that was his motivational speech. And so I think throughout time, there's always been people, you know, who've done that for people in their lives and friends and family who've been that motivation. But what's sad is that people don't even have those friends. People are lonely. And that's something that kind of stood out to me when I was going through your videos last night, and like, wow, it's kind of sad that so many people don't have that motivation in their life, that they have to go like online to find it. And I don't mean that in any way like I know you don't.
You know what I mean? But it's like, it's just a social thing that's interesting to think about, and that this world is in so much need, and it's wonderful that you provide that. And it's the same thing with spirituality and just truth, like, and especially Western culture. We take in so much meaningless, trite media. You know, we take in so much, there's just so much triteness, like TikTok dance videos. Yeah, it's entertaining and all that, but it's trite. It's not filling the soul. It's not helping you change your life. And so how wonderful it is that someone can find something. And I mean, you know, there's so many comments on your videos, because I was going through the comments too, just trying to understand your audience. And it's like, they're saying you changed their lives, or like you gave them hope to go on one more day, or like, I mean, I even saw some that said like, I've been contemplating suicide, and this like put me on course. Like, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And what do you think about that? Of just like this country, and just that sad element that people are so hopeless, even, you know? Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of ways to take the conversation. I think the premise itself, I may think a little bit differently than you on where, like, so I love starting my day with something positive. It's like a framing where, you know, some days I need, you know, Eric Thomas screaming, hey, dude, just do more, you know? And it's like, thank you, right? And some days I like to delve into the philosophical and listen to Jordan Peterson, whatever. But that priming, like, to me, all motivation, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, is a perspective shift. Yeah. So you go back to your world within, you know better than anybody, the outside external doesn't dictate anything. It's how you are looking and projecting out. Yeah. And so to me, like, incorporating that sort of priming into my morning is critical, and just reinforces the important things. Cool. And I've found that, like, you know, just like any morning routine, like when I don't, I'm more susceptible to be swept away by the current, for lack of a better, you know, so, but, you know, I guess societally speaking, I think, you know, we're certainly at a point where, you know, we've talked about this in depth, where connection is lacking. Mm-hmm. And I do think, like, no YouTube video is going to substitute connection. That's 100% true. Yeah. And I can even say personally, you know, I've been working siloed in many respects for a long time, and really placing an emphasis on having amazing people around me. Yeah. Because that makes a difference. It makes a difference to be able to,
have a support group that pushes you. And, so certainly I would say that is advantageous, if not imperative for, men today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you just kind of put the hammer on the nail of the head there when you said back to the emotions and the practical. You realized that how you like to start your day with positive affirmations, and in that early morning, hear that, and so you took something that you like and like, oh, this is beneficial for me, and it's probably beneficial for others.
Exactly.
And that's that practical, understanding. And when an artist can merge the practical with the emotions and the creativity and the art, that's when you can create something that's needed. Because in people who, unfortunately, art, whether it's a painting on your wall or a song or a poem, people, it's become something they don't realize they need. We talked about this environment, like how it feels so creative, and people don't realize that they need art. They need inspiration. It's really easy to think about, I need money, I need shelter, I need food, I need water. But we actually do, as human beings, need art. We need inspiration. And we can draw that inspiration from nature, from spirituality, from the creator, from other people, from colors, from a flower,
Yeah.
And I really appreciate in your videos and in your writing how you have a knack for drawing inspiration from everything in life. I was telling you about that video you shot in, was it Ohio? I'm sorry.
North Carolina.
North Carolina, thank you. How he was like basically find the beauty in the mundane. You can be walking through like a dilapidated, town, that's falling apart, but there's beauty there, there's meaning there. And if more people, it's consciousness, if more people could find meaning in the little things in life, the simplicities of life, the beauties of life, and have a perception of life where they can learn from whatever it is. We ran into a friend today when you said, how you doing? He said, it's just all about your attitude. And I was like, yeah, man, you could be knee deep in a pile of shit and be doing great if your attitude's great,
Yeah.
And just the beauty of that mindset, human beings, we want a quick fix. We want instant gratification, and we always think that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. If I could just get to the beach, I'll be fine. If I could just do this.
Yeah.
But
you don't know you have to take yourself with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think about my second cousin, beautiful man. And I always think when I'm struggling with something and wanting something else, or thinking I need an adventure, or I need this to feel something, or find peace, or I need a break, or whatever, this man every single night for 15 years would sit and watch the sunset with nothing, no phone, and he just was content. And like, that is peace. Like, that is, if you can just sit still and watch the sunset every night and not looking at your phone and be worried about this, and find beauty in that, and just watch the sun go down and see the colors and hear the birds chirping, that to me is like enlightenment,
Yeah.
Because we're thinking, I got to get this, I got to get the booze, I got to get the drug, I got to get the high, I got to get the dopamine release, I need this, I need that. And to me, like, a highly ascended person finds that peace, and then finds it even in the mundane.
Yeah.
And I had this conversation with a guy recently who's, has a job where it's very mundane. And I'm like, just see it as a meditation. Like, there's actually a beauty in the mundane, because your mind doesn't have to think about what you're doing once it memorizes it, and then your mind can actually think about other stuff. So he was like, I just do such simple things, and I have no creative outlet, and I'm not contemplating. I'm like, why aren't you contemplating? If you're doing something mundane that's a task, your mind can be contemplating big stuff. You can find value in it. Like, that's actually kind of a blessing. Like, you're not sitting, being an astrophysicist or, trying to figure out stuff where your mind is preoccupied. You're doing a physical task where then your mind can actually think about other stuff. I'm like, that's kind of a blessing. Like, I wish I had more mundane. Like, I used to love mowing the lawn because it was just like a relaxing thing.
Therapeutic.
Like, therapeutic. Wow, I can just think and do something that's super simple and follow the line and mow the lawn, and that's like peaceful. But we've kind of lost that in society, and there's just this drive for more and more and more, and nothing's enough. Like, you got to have the next big thing. You got to jump off the cliff. You got to go skydiving. You got to, which is all fun. I get that too. I love that stuff. But I think humanity would be a lot better off if we could find the beauty in the simplicity.
Yeah. How insane is that we have that power,
Yeah. The mind arena, man. The mind arena of choice.
Amen. I mean, it's taken me a while to learn. Like, I think, sometimes I oversimplify, but like it helps. You could condense it condense it down to everything you need's in the room with you. Even answers to big questions. Like I'll give you my personal example just because I lived it. So like when I started, telling stories into a microphone and writing, I didn't create anything out of it. Like I didn't have to spend $100K on, like, these are all things that were in my room. They're instruments that I walk by every day. I just use them a little bit differently one day and all of a sudden, boom, fireworks. It's like, there's so much around, like everything we need is around us, but we think there's got to be some big cosmic fix, or there's a giant adventure that separates where you are from what you need. And so much of the time, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
To your point, if you step back and you just look at things a little bit differently, there's a metaphor that I like that helped me. It's like when you're stuck, you're in a dark room, you have to live as though the light switch is an arm's reach away. And it's like, you can't see it, but it's there. And so feel around, and eventually you'll find that next step and that next step and that next step.
Yep. Are there any specific writers or books or that you've read over the years that you draw inspiration from and you go back to, or any like key inspirational authors that you are like you're in your top list?
Yeah, there's a few books that like I scream from the mountaintops. I think Essentialism by Greg McKeown is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and that's just because it's a very simple concept. We're wired to think, I'm in lack. I need more. I need more. I need more. What's out there that I can get? Where's the missing puzzle piece? And he kind of says, stop, take a breather, and cut away the majority of what's in your life, because it's not that you need more, it's that you're carrying too much. Yeah. So it's sort of an alignment thing, which is pretty cool. Relentless by Tim Grover is one of the only books I've read like 4 or 5 times. And basically Tim Grover, I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah.
Kobe and Jordan's trainer.
Yeah.
And just you get an inside look into the minds of people that were so tenacious about what they did, that when you find yourself not experiencing the type of success you're looking for, it's really good self-reflection, because you go, oh God, like that's what excellence takes. So like that's a really good framework. I love reading about the founding fathers, a little biased, but I just think the risk and the courage and the tenacity with which they live is, when I'm over here nervous to make a phone call, it's like, how many times did John Adams cross the Atlantic? Like, you'll be okay, So like things like that. The Martian, great book. Yeah. Great for entrepreneurs. It's one of the only fiction books I'd recommend for entrepreneurs about, Mark Watney dropped on Mars, left to die essentially, and is being resourceful, utilizing the pieces around him to just live one more day until he's rescued, and is kind of sarcastic and fun throughout the whole thing, which in and of itself is a life lesson. It's like, don't take things too seriously. I could go on forever. Music, art, like John Mayer, one of my favorite artists. I think it's brilliant that he is sort of under the radar Jimi Hendrix of our time, but also writes a good pop song. And I think when you combine two things that are, of two different worlds, and you create your own unique space in something, like there's beauty in that. Yeah. So it really is just kind of being observant, Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a quality you really have, is observation, and a lot of people don't take the time to just observe and then absorb.
Yes.
Because we're moving too fast, But from what I've seen from your writings, you just take the little things in life and you observe, and then you know how to, write about it and draw inspiration from that, which is a great quality. If more people had that, they'd have more peace and understanding. Yeah. And that's what everybody wants, peace and understanding. And I myself, move too fast through life. And I guess I could slow down. What can I take from this situation? How can I, reframe my language too? And language is a powerful thing. We're talking about motivation and inspiration and using language, and there's science now, new science behind language, in the self-talk. And we have such negative self-talk. You know, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not whatever enough. I can't do it. But even just the simplicity of I can do it, you know, and using language to reinforce, like, human beings are so powerful. Like, we don't realize how resilient we are, what we're capable of. And the wisdom, too, of pulling upon the past and the history, like the founding fathers. I often talk about that, like, not having a good knowledge of history does not serve us, because the history is what writes the future. And if you're looking into the future, you need to know the history. Like, what did these people do? How did they do that? How did they achieve that? And I find by studying history, I have a broader understanding of how the future is going to evolve. And that's the cool duality of, like, history versus future. Like, the present actually isn't defining what's going to happen in 10 years. What happened 10 years ago is really defining what's going to happen in 10 years. In my opinion, that's what I've observed through, like, studying things, you know. And there's trends that are happening now that are, say, in the course. But when you really start reading history and understanding the evolution of even just civilization, the evolution of America, like the founding fathers, and how things happened, the timeline is longer than we think. You know, like, the timeline of shaping culture, shaping individuals takes decades, you know. There's quick transformation individually that we can have, but, like, mass consciousness, like, it's, you know, it takes years. Like, women couldn't vote, 100 years, like less than 100 years ago. Yeah. Crazy. And I bet they thought, in 10 years, the suffrage movement, you know, they thought probably in 10, 15 years we'll be able to vote, you know. And I don't have the exact numbers in my head of how long it took, but it took way longer, you know. And even, like, slavery in this country, understanding and the Civil War and that whole thing, it took many years for the consciousness to realize, hey, wow, what we're doing is kind of wrong. Yeah. Like, these are fellow human beings. This is insanity. And it took literally a war to kill people, you know, to change that. Yeah. And it's sad that that's what it takes, but it does take time and it takes realization. And I think the lack of higher consciousness and spirituality and God consciousness in humanity, you know, there's an interesting, you went to school and studied political science, which I just learned over lunch. And I was talking about an author I used to read a lot of, Chris Hedges. And, you know, he's a moral humanist. So when he writes, he's like, he has such a strong understanding of morality, but he doesn't bring God into it. And that's fine. Like, because when I read it, I have a God conscious. So I'm like, I'm just replacing words with, you know, spiritual words and what he's writing and seeing that. But what I'm getting at is that morality and then spirituality are two different things. You know, morality, right and wrong, and how we treat human beings and all that, that's wonderful and needed. But the reason why we do it is when you start having a spiritual consciousness and you start understanding the benefits of what morality is and consciousness and the urges. See, to me, when you start getting a spiritual life and you start having self-mastery, that's what controls our human nature and our urges. And our urges often are what can prevent us from, not prevent us, which can cause us to make immoral choices, where we pursue greed, lust, we hurt people, whatever it may be. Those are human urges. And you can't just have a moral understanding, you have to have a consciousness of why it's wrong to do that. And I think the relation of motivation and understanding that human beings innately want to reach for something higher. They may not know what it is, you know. Obviously, religion and God is an easy one to frame, but something higher is wanting to be different than they are. And how do they get there, you know? And the link is work, but not just work. It's knowing what you want to be, knowing what you want to become, and how do you become it, and defining it. And we need teachers in our lives. We need, you know, we need motivation, clearly. But what we need most of all, I think, to get where we want to go is, best way to put this because it's really out there, like, is a consciousness of the big picture. Like, we're on this planet here. We're just human beings. If you imagine if there is, which I believe there's obviously intelligent life in the universe, you look down on us, we might just look like ants on a mound, running around.
Yeah.
We're just ants to whatever's up in the universe looking down on us. But when a human being realizes we're not just an ant, we're not just running around, there's an ascension process, that we have souls inside of a body. I mean, how cool is that? And that we're like ascending. We're not, and I know that's really out there, but the link to that is that humans always urge for something higher. The Neanderthals even looked to the stars and wondered, what's up there?
Yeah.
Where am I going? And so the desire to be better, to be bigger, to learn more, to become better is an innate human thing that has to be fostered.
Yeah. I think that's beautifully said. And to your point, coupled with context. And so whether you're talking about understanding we are very small pieces of an enormous collective, or understanding history. A few minutes ago you mentioned that, and I'm like, that's money, because people look around now and see these, we're not in a perfect world, right? And so they'll see things that are like inadequate, less than ideal, and they'll think, blow it up, or tear it down, this isn't good enough. When you understand the historical context, there's a gratitude and a grace that, so you mentioned like slavery, women's suffrage, right? MLK had a great quote, about cashing a blank check that the founders wrote, where it's like, these are less than ideal circumstances. Mm-hmm. But every generation is going to take that torch and carry it a little further and a little further and a little further. We're imperfect beings in an imperfect society, but together, because of these ideals, we're moving. And if you look now compared to where we were 250 years ago, it's remarkable where we've come. Yeah. And it's remarkable where we'll go. But if you don't have that appreciation and respect. And it's like, so I do think, context is critical to be grateful and graceful, to yourself and those around you.
Yeah. I like that. Context is critical to be graceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. So how do you measure success? I mean, obviously the low hanging fruit is, views and likes, and you got millions of views, and that's one form of success. Like, great. My content's being digested and people love it. But like, what do you, at the end of the day, when you feel successful, what is it for you that creates that feeling?
I think it's two things. It's one, am I happy? And two, am I adding value to others? Mm-hmm. You mentioned inspiration as being critical, right? And like, I've learned this too. It's like, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity. If I'm not inspired, how am I going to help anybody? Right? And so when you go out and you allow life in and you experience the beauty and you have fun with friends and you go off into the woods and you hike and you empower yourself, you charge yourself to then give back and add value to others. It's hard to pour from an empty cup. Mm-hmm. So like, to me, it's amazing how much time, and it sounds selfish, like hearing me say it, but it's like so critical. I've spent so much time just working on staying inspired so that I can share what I learn with people. And then the other piece is, are you adding value? And there's a lot of ways to measure that, anecdotally, of course, but then, when you're in the online space, unfortunately, some of that comes to data. If you're trying some new medium and the chart is straight down, you take a step back and you go, well, maybe I'm not connecting with people the way I should or can, and you pivot. So it is that sort of culmination of what lights me up and adds value to the world. I think when you hit that intersection, there's fireworks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, success is, obviously there's all the obvious things, accomplishing things, creating things, having other people appreciate it. That's normal human nature. I mean, it's success to make a nice meal and feed it to someone and they love it and it tastes good and they compliment you on your cooking. These are little things. But yeah, the big thing for me is helping someone change, because change is the key to growth. Mm. And like, if I can, and that's what your videos are like, if I can inspire someone or help someone change, and that could be a little thing from like a 3-minute conversation, or it could be like a huge thing to like 6 or 7 months of going through a program, or like, but if my interaction with someone helps them think differently about life or think differently about themselves in a good way and makes them want to change something, that's success.
That's powerful.
That's like a beautiful thing. Like, wow. Like, and there's been a lot of people and elders and friends and loved ones in my life who've done that for me. And the cool thing is when it's happening, you're not aware of it. You're not like, oh, I'm going to go change someone today. I'm going to go save someone. It's just the ministry of spirit.
Yeah.
It's love. It's concern. And then it just happens. And usually it's afterwards. You're like, oh, wow. And then you become more aware as you see success in like their feedback. Like, wow, man, like what you said to me the other day really helped change my perspective. Thank you for that. Then that's like, wow, that's success to me. Like making $1 million, whatever. But if someone says, man, like what you said to me helped me change the way I view this thing in my life, and thank you for that, like that's a kind of an untangible thing. And I think in this world, there's not enough value placed on that, you know, because the success that the media and this world teaches you is the yacht and the money. And that is all success on some level, but it's not the eternal success. It's not the lasting success, and it's not filling what's within in our souls, you know, like me making $1 million to buy a yacht isn't the same feeling of someone saying, wow, you helped me change. Like, how cool is that, you know? And if more people pursued a mindset of seeing success differently, you know, of helping people, adding value to people, like you say, the world would become a better place pretty quickly, you know? Yeah. And so shifting that perspective and bringing that, you know, bringing truth to people is a very rewarding thing. But what is truth? This guy's truth over here is different than my truth. He believes something different. But the beautiful thing about truth is there's a tapestry, and there's threads that weave through this tapestry, and it's all the same truth. And so it may be woven differently, but when you start dissecting even religions and belief systems, you start dissecting human beings, truth is the same for these people. It's just different semantics, different ways of expressing truth, different ways of living truth. And so a good humanist, a good person who loves human beings, tries to find those similarities of truth in all human beings and be a bridge builder and be a connector and find that thread of truth. Like, we all have things in common. And I've always thought personally, a high mark of, you know, an ascended human being, and for me, like a high mark for me is that I can break bread with anybody and find something in common, you know. And yeah, I have my beliefs. I'm committed to what I believe. I have a strong sense of self in my life, but that doesn't mean this person who lives maybe even completely opposite from me, there's something I have in common with them, and finding that and then nurturing it and building upon that. If the world did that, you know, if we all did that, what a great place the world would be. But we're so focused on separation and what's different, and that's a way that the powers that be divide and conquer. If you keep people focusing on our differences, it's easy to control them, you know. But all of that, I say, circles back to what human beings want. And what human beings want is that motivation, is that truth, is that higher connection. You know, it all comes back to connection for me. People are so lonely. They're looking to connect. And I think you have a very natural and great ability to connect with the human condition. I call it the human condition, which is the struggle of life.
Yeah, life's hard.
Life's hard.
Yeah.
You know, and connecting with that human condition and the way you write and the way that you pull just the trials and tribulations of life. But the cool thing that I find about your writing is you're not saying it. You're not making the obvious statement, you know, life is hard. You're saying how someone should view life, because it's obvious life is hard. And you're providing a higher, more positive outlook on how to do things. And it's needed, man. So I thank you for that.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's like...
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, meeting people where they are, you know? And it's like I think the worst thing about pain, in moments of pain, is sometimes it's just the loneliness and the worry that it's going to go on forever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like less the actual pain itself. And so sometimes, you know, you don't need a specific It's like, hey, this is life, and you're going through your valley of despair right now. I'm going through mine. That's life. And you know what? We'll both be on mountaintops soon. And I think that just light bulb moment where it's like, that can change someone's life, putting that metaphorical armor on their shoulder. I mean, like, this is not forever.
Yeah. I was watching some of your videos, and you had some book reviews you used to do years back, and I noticed The Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
One of my favorites.
And I read that book, and I really loved it too. And one of the quotes you talked about in that book that he said is, "The man who I want to be and the man I am sleeps in the same bed at night." And there's a lot to unpack there. Like, that's a cool concept, and like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, you're both there, we're who you want to be and who you are. We're the same in that compassionate viewpoint on ourselves. Yeah. But also it has the higher call to be something better. And yeah, that book, like, I was thinking about that book for weeks after I read it. Like, you just don't know, like, oh, he's Matthew McConaughey, he's an actor. And you talked about like him not compromising, which that really stood out to me in the book too. Like, he just turned down all these offers because he got known as this rom-com guy, and doing these silly rom-com movies, and he's making a ton of money, and he's just a handsome stud. But he's like, I want to make art. I want to actually act. I want to be in movies that have more meaning than just rom-com. And because he didn't compromise, and he kept getting all these offers, and I think he went 6 years without making a movie, and then he made Dallas Buyers Club. Great movie, and real acting, and raw, and like, and I think he got an Academy, or he was nominated. I can't remember if he actually won it. I think he did.
I think so.
Yeah, I think he did. He was definitely nominated. I think he might have won it, Best Actor. But if he wouldn't have committed to that, if he wouldn't have, like, he knew when he went to bed at night, this is the man I want to be. This is the art I want to make. This is the acting I want to do. And if he would have compromised for the money and taken that $14 million offer to make that rom-com with Jennifer Aniston or whoever it was,
Yeah.
He probably would have never got there. But if you look at his movies after Dallas Buyers Club, they're all just bangers, man. Like Free State of Jones, excellent, and like and then he did True Detective, and he starts making this content that's more meaningful and raw and great acting.
Yeah.
And he transformed himself, but he had to commit to that process to get out of that mold of he's just a handsome shirtless stud in a stupid rom-com.
Yeah. And it's easy as an observer too to be like, okay, the multimillionaire actor stopped doing rom-coms, right? But when you take the premise that, I guess, how hard it is when you have something to lose it. Your biggest fear, especially making that kind of money, whatever it is, the only thing harder than wanting to acquire something is protecting it and trying not to lose it. And so for 6 years in an industry that's that turbulent, to sit it out and say no, and potentially throw away to be that just stubborn in his convictions, I think like everyone can learn from that, And that book really did surprise me. I was the same boat. I'm like, I know he's an actor. I know he's a smart guy. I've heard him talk. But he's truly like a poet. Like just the diversity of his ability to storytell, and a lot of crossover there.
And I didn't know, we see these actors, we see these musicians, and we don't know their whole life story. We don't know how they grew up. Maybe we assume like they had a dream to be an actor. But what's interesting about him is it wasn't like a strong dream in him. Like, I want to be a world famous actor.
Yeah.
He went to not boarding school, but an exchange in Australia, and he was just like, he started realizing I'm kind of handsome, charismatic guy, and people make these comments, you should be a model, you should do this. And he's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. But, when he got on the set of his first movie, which became his famous line, all right, all right, all right. Like, he didn't even plan that. That was complete ad lib, and he wasn't even going to be in the movie. I mean, he had a small part, but if I remember correctly from reading the book, the director just like loved him so much they just kept adding scenes with him.
Yeah.
And then he pulled up in the car, and he didn't even have lines because they were literally adding him to scenes as they were shooting the movie. So the director would be just like, oh, just pull up here and say something to these chicks. I just thought it's like kind of poetic that like his first ad lib line is just 3 words. All right, all right, all right, repeated. And that became his like motto, and it just like launched it. And I mean, part of me thought like comes into kind of a more esoteric conversation about destiny. Like it was his destiny.
Yeah.
And, you got hopeful actors and you got hopeful musicians, and oftentimes they're jealous of other successful musicians or other actors. That's like a huge thing in that world. Like, I've been to Hollywood a few times. I love to act. I've gone into auditions. I've gotten auditions. I've sat before big time producers, and there's just this vibe of like jealousy. Even the ones who've made it are afraid of losing where they're at. So they're jealous of someone else who has potential. And it's just so competitive and so nasty. And after I read that book, I thought, wow, like, it was his destiny.
Yeah.
It was his destiny to be this. Like, he didn't chase it. He didn't even try. Like, God made it happen. And that's really cool. Like, and it came into place. But then he still had to be tested, because it came into place. But then when he realized, I'm good at acting, then he did have to do some work by refusing, for 6 years, turning down all these stupid scripts, and he wanted to make something meaningful. And so even when God, if you don't believe in God, whatever, but even when you get what you think you want or get what you want, there's still going to be tests. And I think people forget that, like there's still tests, or there's still a next level, to refining your craft, to becoming more and to giving more. And, he wanted to bring more meaning to people through his stories, through the movies. And you're not going to bring meaning through a stupid rom-com, but he realized like there's scripts in these stories, that can bring meaning. And so he earned it.
Do you believe people arrive where they're supposed to be? In other words, just for some context. So like if I personally, like just biologically, if I'm like, I want to be a calculus professor and I gave my whole life to that field, I'd be better, maybe a hell of a lot better than I am, maybe up there, but I'm capped. My brain doesn't work that way, so it would almost be square peg round hole. Whereas like writing, once I fell into it, immediately it was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Because one, I love it. It's my innate talent. And when you start putting in reps, you have an opportunity to really shine. Yeah. And so, to echo what you said, it made me think of like, when you mentioned Matthew McConaughey, I'm like, that meets his skill set, his personality, he's biologically made to do what he's doing. And I'd be curious to get your take. Like, do you think we all find ourselves there eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big concept, and one of my, my father talks about predestination. Yeah. And what does that mean? It's a huge concept, but I personally think that we arrive, like we have innate talents and abilities in us, and we have to find them. We have a personality created, and we're born, and we're down here, and we have to figure out how to evolve into that blueprint. There's a blueprint created for us. We have the innate abilities within us, and we get off track, we get confused. But if you can align with what you're supposed to be doing in your life and find those talents, like you went to college and you were studying political science and you were a musician, but I don't know, like, did you think, I'm going to be a writer?
No, that's why
you discovered it. Yes. And so oftentimes we think we want to do one thing, but it's actually not what we're meant to do. I'm curious, like, how did you fall in, like, what happened where you were like, wow, I'm a good writer. Like, I'm writing, this is some good shit. Like, what was that moment for you?
Well, that year of exploration where like is the very friction that most people go, no, right? Yeah. No. The ego says, no, you can't do that. Yeah. Right? So like I was in the wrong place. Yeah. Like my world was Excel sheets and hell, right? Yeah. So it was like not what I wanted to do. And so like when I just spent time trying things, I started realizing like you can really make a difference doing this. The thing is the ego hurts. I always tell the story of in Boston being in a bar with my two friends, and they're like very successful. Like one of them's already lined up with like, we're talking early mid-20s, already lined up with a senator. One of them's working at Goldman, and like we were talking to girls at the bar, and like the dreaded questions like, what do you do? I'm like, no, don't ask me. I'm like, I have an idea for a YouTube channel, right? It's like I wanted to take a long walk off a short pier after having that conversation. It just hurt, but like and now you look at it, it's like, get over it. Yeah. One, who cares? And like, I don't know, but it felt bigger than than it is, as is usually the case. But if you can sort of navigate through that and really put your ego aside and just give life a chance and try things and, dip your toe in the water, I think you'll find some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I would never have found it moving cells around in Microsoft Excel. I just wouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to your other question about like finding those talents and like what we're supposed to do. I think those talents and discovering who we are and what we're supposed to do takes time, but it also takes virtue. And through virtue, it's unlocked. So like by doing right things. See, if you're chasing money and you're chasing success, daddy wants me to go work for Goldman Sachs to make a lot of money. You may not ever find it. Now, you may be successful. You may learn the trade, make a lot of money, but you may never find what you're supposed to do until you do some soul searching. Like even back to McConaughey, after he got a little success early on in his career, if you recall, he's like, is this who I am? Is this what I want to do? Like, I need to do some soul searching. So he did like a road trip, around the country. And by then he was just starting to get kind of famous and he was recognizable, So he went to small towns and, some people would recognize him. He wasn't mega famous yet, but he was like right at the cusp of just blowing up. But he was like, I need to go search and take some time, and to figure out like if this is who I am. And I admired that, because he could have saw like, oh, this is a huge path. This is easy. I want to make tons of money. I'm in it. But he was like, is this going to bring me happiness? Is this who I am meant to be? And so even if it was, and I think it was who he was meant to be, he still was earnest in discovering that. And so virtue, that's virtuous to like take that time. But people have to, if you want to discover your talents, you have to have that. And I call it virtue because it's outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. You're asking God, you're asking, whatever. If you don't believe in God, you want to say whatever, but you're asking, okay, let me do this. Let me serve others. Let it be revealed to me. Yeah. And then that revealing process looks different for everybody. How it works, how it reveals itself. Sometimes people are blessed to just instantly, like they're out of high school and they know what they want to do and they're good at it and they're in it and they're fulfilled. Some people spend their whole life in a career that they hate, and then they start figuring out, oh my gosh, like I'm going to quit my job. Let me go figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life. They're already 45 or 50 years old, and that's okay too. But part of the problem with this world is that people do have to do that. Like it's kind of sad, that they have to work so hard to find their true purpose. Yeah. And I think a good father and a good mother is going to instill in their children very young, like the value of purpose, not the value of being successful and making money, which I understand why people do that because that's what we're trained to do. Like they see that as a success. Like, if you're a musician, most parents can be like, you can't make money being a musician, like you might want to look at a different career. Like, don't do that, son. Right. That's the worst thing to do. Don't be an artist. You're not going to pay the bills being an artist, son. And it's coming from a place of love, no doubt, but there's a higher way. Like if my son or my daughter is like, I want to be a musician or I want to be an artist. Of course, I live in a very different culture, so that would be fostered. But even if I wasn't, from what I know now of myself, I would foster that in some way, and help them understand how can we do this where you can bless other people and serve other people and be happy and survive, instead of just shut it down. And there's a lot of great movies and stories about this, and there's a lot of musicians who made it. And one of the first things they say after they've made it, is how many people told them not to do it. Yeah. No one believed in them. Their own parents didn't believe in them. Everybody said, you're going to be a loser. You're never going to make it. And they made it. Why they made it and someone else did, I don't know. That's the mystery of the universe. Why someone just as talented as them didn't make it. But they had that self-belief. And that's, maybe that's why they made it. They never gave up. So self-belief is so important. And that self-belief has to be instilled in someone at a young age. Like I tell my kids, you can do anything you put your mind to. Like my little 3-year-old, I can't put on my socks. No. You can put on your socks. Like put it on, like work hard, figure it out. Like you can. From that littlest thing to like, you can conquer the world, Yeah. And you give someone self-belief, just like your friend called you when you were like down in the dumps. He gave you self-belief, I can do this. And people, they need that in their lives, man.
I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to incentives. So it's a friction that I get a lot from people, and it's just wanting to have this conversation around, I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. My parents don't agree, right? And it's like, you're right. It's a 100% place of love. Your parents don't want you to go out into the world and, roll the dice on becoming the next pop star. They want what? Safety, security. They want to know that you have enough to eat. They want the basics covered. And it doesn't mean they love you less. In a lot of ways, it's just how we're programmed as humans. And so when you can depersonalize that and understand, like, there needs to be a certain internal strength and fortitude to push beyond that. And because people believe it once they see it, right? That's the thing. It's like, one of my favorite quotes, I know it's kind of a cliche at this point, but Nietzsche, those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who couldn't hear the music.
Yep.
To me, that quote is everything, because in your own world, anything of substance doesn't exist until you build it. And once you build it, they'll understand.
Yeah.
But until then, no one comes up and hugs you and says, that idea is amazing, man. Keep going. Like, this is not how it works. So you got to trudge through the doubt and the loved ones worrying and your quote unquote friends doing better, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's just the cost of admission. Make peace with that and go.
Yep.
And I think when you realize that's part of the process, there's sort of a safety that comes. You know?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, which has a similar vibration of that Nietzsche quote, is Teilhard Chardin, the French philosopher. And he says, in the context of cosmic values, only the fantastic has a chance of being true. And so, like, only the magnificent, only the wonderful. And Nietzsche's saying, like, you look crazy when you pursue the fantastic.
Yeah.
You look crazy. You're like, but really, that's really the only thing that is true and meaningful, is like pursuing those things that may not make sense to anybody, but they make sense to you and they're important. And that's what brings value to your soul. And, if you look at history again, the value of studying history, the people who have reshaped history and who have caused renaissances and changed things were all demonized during their time. They were told they were crazy. Some of them were assassinated,
Yeah.
But they're the ones who shaped history. And so having the courage to go out, on a limb, so to speak, and not be afraid, to rock the boat is an important thing for cultural evolution. And, my parents created this place because they didn't want people to have to go figure out, how am I going to go survive in the world and clock a 9 to 5? Like, there's more to life than that. Like, let's have a shared culture and community where you can pursue creativity and spiritual growth and not have to clock that 9 to 5. And we live collectively, and you build and you work together, and you have a God-centered reality where you're coming into your destiny purpose. Mm. And destiny purpose is a huge subject. The one way that people stay miserable their whole lives is because they're not in their destiny purpose. They're not doing what they should be doing. That's a sad thing. And that's kind of what we've been talking about. Musicians should be singing and creating art, but they're working at McDonald's because they have to survive, and the concept of survival, I think, is very interesting. And I've always said, we actually haven't evolved as far as we think from hunter-gatherer phase. Right. It's just a more sophisticated way of hunting and gathering. We're still hunter-gatherers.
Same brains. Yeah.
Like we still have to go out and hunt, but now we're just hunting money so that we can buy the food that we used to hunt and grow so that we can survive, or to, have money to pay for shelter. So we're still hunter-gatherers in so many ways.
or even our inhibitor, like the issues. It's like, why do we know that everything advantageous in life comes from deviating from the mean, yet we're scared and innately we want to blend in? Yeah. Because we're hunter-gatherers. Ostracization is death.
Yeah.
So we're still very much incentivized to live like that in a world that's upside down.
Yeah.
So there is just so much learning.
Yeah. And in one of your earlier videos, I think it was one of your spoken word poems, you have a line, and maybe you'll remember it. It's something about deviating from the assembly line.
Oh my God. Yeah.
What was that line? Do you remember?
Oh man.
It was really good.
Deviate from the assembly line.
You were like,
It's a spoken word poem, so like I would have to, I don't remember
it stood out to
flow.
me because it's like, have the courage to deviate from the assembly line, do something different, like, get out of the line that you think you're supposed to be in, and all that. And what a great message, because a lot of people just fall into place. And it seems like we're talking about it, right? Deviate, come on. And it seems so easy. When I left my corporate job, I would have panic attacks running at 2 p.m. because I'm like, this is cubicle time. Like, what am I doing? Like, this is not, am I, So like, so much of it's like, no, you can be your own human. I don't think we realize the extent to which we're indoctrinated. In so many different ways. And unlearning that and just removing yourself from that will unlock just opportunities. Did you experience friction with your family when you left that job and pursued your YouTube channel, which you said, like, I can understand you're sitting in a bar, like, well, I got an idea for a YouTube channel. Like, it sounds so like, oh God, what a dreamer, but like, did you experience like doubt and like your parents or your friends and your family, like, why would you leave this perfect job? Why would you do this? Like,
I've always been very lucky in that they had my back. It's just I could say one of the reasons I'm here. They didn't get it, at first, because how the hell could they? So it was just kind of like, okay, and my dad, kind of subtly slipping me resumes to apply to via email, but like, as you build, they get it. And there was never like don't do this. It was like, when you've worked your entire life to end up at point A and you look around and go, nope, like, that's jarring to a lot of people in your circle. And to me, like, it was a turbulent time. So, so a little friction, but I've just been totally blessed that they've been there,
Yeah, my father often tells the story about when he was young, in his 20s, and he had this job with Honeywell. And, back then it was a well-paying job, and he had benefits and health insurance, but he was a musician, and he hated it. And he was a computer operator. Now, this is, way back, so we're talking about these computers were, 6 feet tall, and like big old buttons you push and, not like this laptop here. But anyways, he quit his job. I want to pursue my music. I'm a musician, and I want to make spiritual music, and I want to minister to people through my music. And everybody said he was crazy. Like, what are you doing? And we're upset with him. But he said, if I wouldn't have made that choice at 20-something years old, none of this would have manifested.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's just like one choice, choice to do something different, to go against the grain, to step out of the assembly line. And I think, people should and do gain inspiration from the people who do that, and making that choice that everybody else around you thinks is completely insane.
That's the saying. You're always one decision away from a totally different life.
Right.
I think the same way when someone leaves a corporate job, my admiration as when you see someone who is, you can tell overweight and running down the street and was perhaps new to it. And it's like, that is so much more powerful than someone going by doing a 5.5 minute split. It's like, I know what it takes and how hard it was to walk up to the door and to put your shoes on and to humble yourself and step into this world that's totally new because you have a vision of a better version of you. It's incredible. And you start seeing these little acts of courage everywhere, and it's like, it's powerful.
What's the hardest thing you've ever done? And I ask that to a lot of people, and sometimes they immediately go to like a physical feat, which is maybe the thing, but sometimes it may be like making that phone call to your friend to tell them something. Like, that was like, when I think about it for myself, sometimes it's not these physical things, I ran 100 miles, or I did this or did that, but it's like, one of the hardest things I've ever done was had to tell somebody what they didn't want to hear. Or like, can you think back of like, what are some really hard things you've...
in the micro and the macro. I mean, I think certainly physically comes to mind, like doing some of these ultras, running across Texas, doing things like that. Stepping on stage the first time. So an interesting dynamic being part of the, I don't know what you call it, digital landscape, digital world. It's like my speaking on camera grew faster than my ability to speak on stage. They're very different things.
Oh, absolutely.
And once you hit
the persona behind the screen and then in person.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I get it.
You get comfort talking to a camera. You think you've reached the mountaintop and someone's like, come talk to 500 people. And you're like, oh God, right? It's just a different world. And so, because YouTube is growing, I started to get opportunities to speak at events. And the first time I spoke in front of a large audience was at a quarterly meeting for a company in Ohio. And I just couldn't sleep. Like my hands were shaking. Like it was, that to me was transformative. And it's like, I'm going to do this, as is the way of things.
Yeah.
Maybe I fall on my face. Maybe I don't. It was fine. C+ performance. We got the job done. Right. But like little things like that along the way where you look back now and you go, that's nothing. Someone could call me tomorrow. I'd smile. I'd fly out there. I'd do that, not lose an ounce of sleep. It'd be incredible.
Yeah.
But like you got to go through that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the little micro things, moving across the country a few times. But I think on the macro, was just sort of that continuous beat down that comes with growing a brand and sharing your voice online. Very low lows and very high highs. It's like it's a roller coaster that's almost indescribable.
Yeah.
And when you look back, like I can't believe it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I introduced, at our men's retreat, you attended the Urantia book and some of the Morancha Moda, and there's one that says, one of the greatest afflictions is to never been afflicted. And that's like, wow.
That's so true.
So true, though. Like, we gain so much from doing hard things.
Yeah.
And that's why, there's a recognition of that now, I think, in modern culture, and there's like, people gain that value, like, oh, let me run that marathon. It's physically hard, do the ultra running. And, you got Jocko Willink talking about doing hard things, and David Goggins, of course, these are like, the obvious guys, but there's so many. And understanding the value of doing hard things and pushing ourselves and doing what's uncomfortable is so important because, again, we live in a culture of ease seeking, instant gratification, not doing the work, always looking for the hack, the shortcut, the easy way to do something. But some people have never actually done hard things, so they don't know that feeling you get of running a marathon, being so exhausted, your feet hurt, your body hurts. You get to that finish line, and that feeling you get inside, that's what's irreplaceable.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, and that gives you confidence, and that gives you confidence to make the next right choice, to do the next hard thing, to excel yourself. And I wish that, it's becoming more known, I guess you would say, for people, but there's still a lot of people who could really gain from understanding the value of doing hard things, whatever it may be in their life. And it could be that phone call you have to make to someone you love to say, hey, man, you're off track, or telling something they don't want to hear. It's hard to do, but, there's those more mental, spiritual, like you say, micro things that are hard to do that people need to do, And the macro is, running the 100-mile race. And that's wonderful. But like the hard things to do to help people is what people shy away from. Yeah. And it kind of ties into something I've shared with you before too, at the, with the other men at the retreat too, is the concept of carefrontation versus confrontation. Like we as men and women, we as human beings, to create a better world, we should carefront the people we love. We should help them become better. If they're doing something that doesn't serve them, hurting themselves, hurting somebody else, we should say, hey man, look, you got to stop this. It's not serving you, or it's not serving this person here. Like what you're doing, I feel is wrong. Now, the inherent risk in doing that is they may get mad at you. You may lose a friend. Yeah. But the importance of taking that risk and speaking the truth is it's coming from a place of love and care for them. And you may save their life, or you may save someone else's life. You may redirect the whole course of their life if they receive it right. And taking that risk, I think, is really important. For me as a man and as a leader, I have to evaluate that all the time. Like I need to say this to this person. Shoot, they may not talk to me for months because I don't want to hear it. But if I don't do it, it's almost like the sin of omission, or it's not being a leader. It's not being courageous. And coming into that for each individual is a spiritual maturation process. It does take self-confidence. It does take awareness, but it also takes love. Like when you deeply love someone, you want the best for them. And true love is tough love, and parents have to do that with their kids. That's an obvious fact. And you don't have kids yet, but I think when parents have kids, they start to really understand the concept of tough love. Telling, and you don't have to have kids to understand it, but that's a real life, applicable process to tell your children things they don't want to hear, or try and help them. even as adult children, that's when you really have to start telling them like, hey, this is not working, man. And they get mad at you and so forth. But I think there's creative and artistic ways to even do that. Like there's artistic ways to teach people, and bringing that in the art and in writing and songs, bringing like those truths to people through an artistic ways is an avenue that I think is really cool for people to explore. I wish they would explore it more,
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I just recently saw like a clip of a keynote where someone was talking about ways to give feedback, called it the sandwich, where it's a compliment and then the feedback and then another compliment.
Sandwich it in.
Yeah,
and that's cool. Yeah.
But I remember, so we were at a retreat about a month ago.
Yeah.
It was incredible. And I remember that was, we spent a decent amount of time being just real with each other and saying things that, maybe people would be scared to tell us.
Yeah.
That, a true friend would sit down and say, hey, you got to fix A, B, and C, or, you don't have to do anything, but some advice from someone who cares about you, and I think that's incredibly powerful because a lot of people in our lives are, to your point, they think they're helping you by babying you and rubber stamping you and giving being yes men. Yeah. And, true evolution comes from honesty.
Yeah, it does. Just vulnerable connection, that realness. So tell me about your ultra running a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing. And, I'm not an ultra runner, but I do like running. I don't run super long distances. I wish I did and had the time to pursue that more. But here's the interesting thing about running. For someone who doesn't running, if they've never running a mile for them is just as hard for someone who's trained to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And so there's a value like this person hasn't run in 10 years. They may be pulling from deep reserves to run that 1 mile.
Yeah.
And so what's hard for someone else may not be hard for someone else. And that's great. But like, just do that hard thing. Like for me, running 10 miles, that's pretty hard. Running 15 miles, running 17 miles, running a mile or two isn't hard anymore, but it was when I first started.
Yeah.
And so that evolution and seeing that and just keep, frankly, running a couple miles might be hard, 9:00 at night when I'm tired and I don't want to do it. And, okay, I just committed to running every day, so I'm just going to run 2 miles. Once you start doing it, then you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like you feel the benefits, you feel even the psychological benefits, A lot of people place a lot of value on the physical benefits of doing hard physical things, but really the reward comes from the psychological victory, and the psychological feeling of doing something hard and conquering it and then feeling good about themselves. Yeah. And you mentioned you run about Texas. I don't know about that. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's all context, when you're talking about doing hard things, it's not just for Instagram.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can run 100 miles and suffer through that, and it is suffering.
Yeah.
You can do the little things that annoy you throughout the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the Texas run was it's actually kind of a funny story. He's one of my best friends now, but I got this email from my friend Tom, and he was like, hey, you don't know me. I listen to your channel. I'm running across Texas. Come join. And I'm like, I don't know who the hell you are, so thank you, but no thank you. And it was just adamant. This is going to change your life. This is going to change your life. And eventually I'm like, you know what? Like, I'll go on the run. Like, whatever, So I'm like, how bad could it be? And it was one of the craziest experiences. So it was me, Tom, in an RV with So he has a company in Oklahoma City, and he brings a handful of employees with him. So there's probably like 6 of us running. And the idea is, at that time, it was like 2 runners at a time, doing certain legs. And it was a long run. And what happened is, like, not all the folks there were runners. And so, like, some of it's not even their fault. You're talking 20, 30 miles in to someone who's never run before, their knees get blown out.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just
There's
like
no conditioning. Yeah.
It's just like Tom and I picking up all the slack and just running this whole thing. And it was, it was just a magical experience because every little stretch is like, it feels like an adventure, and it's difficulty but manageable, and something always hurts, and you just kind of make these little adjustments and you push through. And I remember arriving in Louisiana, and it was like, wow. It was just, you felt like you did something incredible. Yeah. And the brain goes, by the way, for no reason, but then you realize, no, there's definitely a reason. If I can do this without a gun to my head, I can do anything, you know. So yeah,
doing those big hard things, like you said, helps do the little things that are hard throughout the day seem way easier. It's context, it's
exactly.
That's a really cool thing.
And we've done a handful. We do once a year. We ran through Arizona before I lived here. Done Florida a few times. It's good. Keeps you sharp.
Yeah. So with your audience on YouTube, what's some of the feedback that you've received that has surprised you the most?
That's a fun question.
Like, have you ever just received a comment that you're like, whoa, like that's...
Oh, I get the good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, I mean, you do get everything, but has there ever been like something that just like surprised you or even like just struck you and stuck with you? Like, wow, that's,
The most jarring emails that I get that are they're incredibly moving. Like, there's been multiple people on the brink of suicide, and I don't know whether it's fate or what, but they're like, you have no idea how close I was to taking my life. I just watched a video and didn't. And to me, that's like, unfathomable, right? One, because, and you sort of alluded to this earlier, you don't want it to happen, but it's the nature of the beast. Growth is measured by ticks, by views, by watch time. And so you'd have to be an insane person not to look at it and see that.
Yeah.
And so when you have a real human reach out, it's like unbelievable. So it's stuff like that it's really a driving force and motivator. Every once in a while you get someone like, this guy's voice sucks, whatever. Like, there are things that you can't do anything
There's
about.
There's always the trolls, the haters.
Yeah, but the the value that people are receiving from it is makes it all worth it.
Cool. Well, one last little question.
What you got?
Your spiritual walk. I know we've talked a little bit about this, and I think you're in a discovery phase. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm just curious because, I'm such a deeply spiritual person that sometimes I read your writing and it's like, wow, like, how does he tap into this without having, presumably what I think you don't have of this connection, And I'm curious, like, for you in your process, where are you at with that? Like, like, do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? You don't know. You might have told me one time you're agnostic, or, but like, I feel like, I don't want to say channel, but we receive, we're conduits for something greater,
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we can be conduits sometimes without knowing it or even knowing where it's coming from.
Sure.
And, just curious about your walk and your process, and there's no wrong or right answer. It's just like, where are you at in that?
Oh, I'm having
a mystery. Huh?
I'm having some great conversations with some great people about it.
Yeah.
So like the way I describe it is, I don't know if this would make sense to you unless you looked at it from like a truly like from my eyes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I understand the value of that divine relationship, period.
Yeah.
My friends that have, great relationships with God, like, you see it, it resonates. You told me once, walking into any room, you feel like you have 2 bodyguards behind you. That's what your faith does for you. I would have to be insane not to want that. Yeah. And I do. And so here's my question. If that's point C and I'm at point A, right? I wonder, is it just saying I believe enough where it becomes your reality, or is point B lying to yourself until it becomes truth? Because that's the disconnect.
Yeah.
And I told you it's going to make you uncomfortable, but like,
No, not at all. I love it.
that's the thing. Like, I want the result so bad, but I don't know how to get there without turning off my pragmatic brain, which I understand faith is an absence of pragmatism and in many ways evidence. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
But it's like there is this thing where it's like, if you accept this now, know that in the short term at least you are lying to yourself.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. And so I'm talking to a lot of people that have been on that journey, made that transition, and asked them, how they got from point. And what I get a lot of is, I was in so much pain that I just decided to believe, and the Lord saved me.
Yeah.
Right. And I get it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's not enough to move.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, that's often people's avenue to something higher power, so to speak, is through suffering and through pain. And, they went every other direction and they had nothing, and suffering, and they're just on their hands and knees and like, show me the light type thing, But it's interesting because I've said this a few times. Some of the best conversations I've had about God are with atheists, and so I love, and I'm not, or agnostic people, or just don't know, because it's like you're exploring something and talking about it, and their perspective is so different than mine that I learned from it. And the interesting thing, I grew up with it, so I didn't have like an aha moment, and my faith has been tested. I've been really mad, I've had doubts, absolutely, but I find it fascinating when I talk to people who have those aha moments, like where you said the Lord saved me, and I learned from them, because I can't say that I've had like that type of thing, because I was blessed to have it instilled in me as a child. And then as I became a man and became my own human being, then it was verified through my own experiences. So I've definitely had experiences of miracles and faith, but I already believed it, but it verified it. So that's the difference, from a non-believer to a believer. But the pragmatic thing in the logical brain is an interesting thing. And I think at some point, you have to, like you said, you want more. And like, how do you get from A to C? Like, what is B? What is the B per step?
Yeah.
And is it suffering and you have this aha moment and you have nothing else? Or can you get there a different way? It looks like a lot of people get, who don't know God or have a higher religion. I'm not even talking about just like Christianity or anything. It's just recognizing a creator. Yeah. I don't care what you call it,
Yeah. It's like, hopefully I don't have to do meth to find him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting, but it's interesting back to suffering, like how comfort denies exploration. And invention comes from, in necessity, oftentimes. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you're too comfortable, and I'm not saying you are, but this is millions of people, like when you're comfortable and you have everything you need and want, or you think you do, there's no necessity to look for more.
Yeah.
And so, that's why it's easier for someone who's like on meth in the streets and has nothing. They start looking for more and they find it. And that's like the reach of coming out of where they're at and realizing there's more. And I just find it very fascinating. Like, how do I have a conversation with someone like you? Or anybody, it's such a personal experience.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, I'm not here to convince you in any way, and it's not my job to convince you, but I find it fascinating, like the different approaches to understanding something, and where's the evidence, like to me, the evidence is everywhere, but for someone who's not there in the same consciousness where I'm at, like they want the evidence, and so it's a unique experience, but I think,
is it disingenuous even to reverse engineer wanting that feeling in that relationship?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, so you put a mask on in a way.
Yeah.
And not you, like if I were to, like tomorrow, if I were to wake up and say, I am a man of faith.
Yeah.
There would be a point where I just go from 0 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be disingenuous if you weren't,
Right.
And so maybe you say, I'm trying to become a man of faith tomorrow, instead of saying I'm a man of faith. But you only say it if that's what you want, and I guess there will be an experience in your life. I mean, I can't say that because I don't know, but I mean, for people who are looking, there will be an experience where they start to see, that they want it. And because they've seen, maybe like you said, the good conversations you've had with friends around you, the value that it brings. Like, okay, I want that value too. Like, I don't know how to get it. Like, what does it mean? But I'm going to start thinking about and pursuing that value and praying for that value or desiring that value. And sometimes it's, the Urantia book talks about spiritual growth is often completely unconscious. And as a writer, you're being extremely conscious. Like you're consciously all the time, like analyzing and writing out. And so you want like a conscious path to something. But sometimes the growth, spiritual growth, happens in the subconscious and it's unconscious.
Oh, that's pretty profound.
Yeah. And so maybe think about like just putting it out there and just like, okay, I'm going to open up my subconscious to let it be revealed and how it gets revealed. Yeah. It could be the simplest thing. I mean, I think it could be an aha moment where you just like someone says something to you and then it opens the doorway and, I don't know. But it's cool that you're willing to talk about it and explore and be open to it and like,
100%.
But when you want something, whether it's anything in life, whatever you want in life, usually there's a path to get it. But that's interesting about God and spirituality and understanding God. There's no clear path. Everyone says, every religion says, here's the clear path. They think it's the path, but everybody's path is different. Everybody's process of awakening, so to speak, or discovery is completely unique to them. So I could never tell you, here's the way to do it. Here's the belief. Here's the path, that's what religion does, which creates division, That's what, unfortunately, a lot of people are turned off from a religious lifestyle because of that thinking, like me pushing on you how I live and think because it's the way to go and here's how you do it is a turnoff. I at least have the wisdom taught to me from my elders and my own experiences to know that there's nothing I can say to you to like, it's a very personal experience. How you arrive there is your walk. But I know that eventually, I don't know, but I feel that most people will arrive there, and it's interesting when that happens or how it happens, and it's unique for everybody. But I guess my only suggestion is just to be open to the mystery, the exploration. There's equations that cannot be solved. There's ways to, there's not always a plan and a logical thing. It's just like surrender to the mystery. And maybe if you subconsciously like, okay, I want to explore this. I'm curious, even if it's just from curiosity, start having these conversations with people and then start like, infusing some of that into your reality. But that's the best way I can put it. Or listen, ask questions to people who are deeply religious or deeply spiritual. And it doesn't just have to be Christian. It could be a Buddhist. It could be this. It could be a Hindu. It could be anything. Yeah. And just like ask them their experiences. Because I do that because I want to learn more about this and that. And just listening and hearing their perspective kind of opens up, again, that subconscious, mind to receive something, because there's no logic. It's not a logical process,
Which in and of itself is truly profound.
Yeah.
It's like you can overthink something that it's like you say that you're looking, put that into the universe, surrender to it. Yeah. And you're on your journey. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not a math equation. Yeah. So
that's cool, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing, it's cool, and appreciate your time, man. It's been an awesome conversation, and you're doing great work, man. Keep up at it and keep pushing the boundaries, man, and doing cool stuff. And I guess one of my last questions is, where do you see, and maybe this is personal to you and you're trying to figure it out, you don't know, but what do you think the next level is for you? And like, have you ever felt like you hit a plateau, and what have you done to kind of get out of that plateau and get that growth curve again?
Yeah, I want to say I'm in a transitory moment now where it's, I love the media side. And so that's where I've been. And if you asked me even 6 months ago, it would be more media, bigger media.
Yeah.
And I love it. So I'll always be involved in it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I've neglected to do is create an environment where it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not only, priming your brain or listening to these, getting dopamine hits in the morning, but like creating an environment where people can help each other and, make change actionable.
Yeah.
And so I want to emphasize or put more emphasis on that.
Yeah.
Helping folks get from 0 to 1.
Cool.
That's my mission,
programs
man,
and like coaching or like a container or like steps and tools, for people to
tools
to
is a great
change.
way to put it.
Yeah. We all need tools, man.
Especially now, I think community over and over and over again. And that could look like a million different things, a million different ways, but some type of environment where people can help each other.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, man. And I just enjoyed the hell out of the conversation. I appreciate you having me, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming down. Appreciate you. Until next time, we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, man.
That was great. I appreciate it, dude.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, man. Subscribe, like, share, follow. You know the routine. Thanks for listening.